morning, everybody. I am very, very sorry for the delay in the start, but I got to tell you, we have got a great show planned for you today. There's a lot of things that are going on that I can tell you right now are serious, serious game changers, and we're going to talk about why those are game changers in a minute. But we have to talk about the premise of why things are changing, and it's a critical conversation for us to have. So hold on to the seat of your pants. This is going to be an interesting one. Hot off the press, I've got some interesting news items for us to be looking at. I think a majority of our time is going to center around what Egypt just did and why that's a big deal. By the way, I am releasing a video on one aspect of this in the next couple of days because I think it's really, really important. And if you are concerned about things that are going on in the Middle East, you're concerned about what's happening in Israel, you're concerned about things that are going on in Jerusalem, then you undoubtedly need to know what is going on, especially with respect to what Egypt just did. Now, I think that this story regarding Egypt is a bit of a game changer, not because the news story itself actually moves the issues, right? That's really not the issue here. This story is a bit of an inconsequential sort of story, and the maneuvering is part of a regular scenery of maneuverings that take place in the Middle East, especially as these nations relate to Israel. But what is a game changer here, and what is undoubtedly something that signals that things are about to get real, is to listen to the underlying current of what is driving stories like this and where things are actually going to go. So we have to start on a premise that's completely different from everything else that we've been talking about as of late, and that is we have to stop. We have to not think about what's happening in the Middle East right now. We have to sort of ignore that for just a second. And we have to look at a couple of very important biblical principles, because if we do not stop to examine what the scriptures say about the moment that we are in and the days that we are facing, then we are undoubtedly going to have an extraordinarily difficult time putting together the pieces to everything else that we're actually seeing. And I think that this is really, really, really important as we get into the conversation for the day that we are in. And folks, I got to tell you this right now, things are changing rapidly, and it should be something that should not bring surprise to us, and it should not cause us to be worried or to be concerned about the things that we're facing in the current moment. We just know that it's par for the course, right? We just know that. And so again, there's a lot of lying happening. We've been seeing it. It's been part of the process for what has been happening, the deception going on, the kind of insanity that we have been witnessing on a day-to-day basis. It all relates to some very important biblical principles. Now, the first one is really simple, and that's this: Satan is the father of lies. Okay, we cannot deny that. Satan is the father of lies. If you ignore that principle, then you're going to ignore the premise by which everything else is actually based in. If you don't understand the idea that the Lord God Almighty is truth, he doesn't represent truth, he is truth. He doesn't represent some, idea of golden set of rules and standards that sort of drive an idea of recommendations or a subset of recommendations for how we should live. The God of the universe is the one who not only created us, but he's the one that gave us his manual that teaches us exactly how we ought to live. And the Bible makes it clear that God is true, that his word is true, that everything about the things of God center around truth because he himself is the full encapsulation of all that is true. He himself is the truth. That's a difficult principle for some people to understand, because the reality of it is, if you don't understand the premise of what drives how we live on a day-to-day basis, you're never going to understand where we go from there. You're never going to understand what comes next. I'm going to talk about this tonight. where John, even recognizing this, tells the church in Ephesus, he says, look, beloved brethren, don't believe every spirit, but try the spirits, whether they are of God, because many false prophets are gone out into the world. There is a narrative that is being driven in the current moment that we are in that changes its ugly face on a day-to-day basis to meet whatever stringent idea or standard or thought process drives the insane derivatives that we're actually seeing in the world in which we live today that continue to send people in the direction of darkness. We see it all the time. And what we continue to see is a series of lies that come forth that create ideas that are absolutely broken. Let me give you an example of this. This is an interesting story that just came out. And this story, I think, should be eye-opening to you guys. I think this should be something that should wake you up to see what is actually going on, what's actually happening, because the reality of it is there's a lot more insanity happening right in the heart of all that we're talking about, okay? So let's talk about this because this is really interesting. Here's a story hot off the press, and it's an indisputable issue. Many of you have probably heard the phrase Nakba. Some of you may have not. I'm not going to get into the details of this specific day, right? But let me read to you the headline to this article. I'm going to read to you some of the paragraphs in this article that will help you understand, because we are living in the days of deception. Remember what John says. Believe not every spirit, but try the spirits, whether they are of God, because many false prophets are gone out into the world. Hereby know we the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesseth that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is of God. And every spirit, notice this, that confesseth not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is not of God. And this is the spirit of Antichrist. Watch this, folks. Whereof, if you have heard that it should come, and even now already is it in the world. Are we waking up to see this? Are we recognizing what's going on? Are we seeing what's happening? John is not playing around. So look at what's going on. Let me give you a story here, then we'll get more into the text, because the text here is a very important text. But look at this story. We get to the subject of this Nakba Day. Let me read this to you. And the title, by the way, is an important one. It says, anti-Israel group leading pro-Hamas protests under fire for false claim about Israel's Independence Day. As you guys know, we just recently celebrated, or Israel just recently celebrated its Independence Day, right? I think this is really critical. I think it's really critical that we stop for one moment and talk about what Israel's Independence Day is all about. First and foremost, we have to start in one place, and that is the fact that when we talk about Israel's Independence Day, which of course we are talking about May the 14th, 1948, it is a day that represents the rebirth, not the birth, the rebirth of the nation of Israel after being displaced from their homeland for almost 2,000 years. There have always been Jews in Israel since before the time of 1948, actually even since the time of Titus coming into the temple and destroying it in 70 AD. Jews have always been in the land. But the fact that Israel has actually been rebirthed as a nation in 1948 is significant. And it's significant for a lot of reasons. But let's go back for 1 second and let's look at the false claim that's being made. Let's read the story about the false claim. It says this. It says, a prominent anti-Israeli group that has helped organize widespread demonstrations against the Jewish state during the war in Gaza falsely claimed that Israel's Independence Day was intentionally placed to obscure a Palestinian Day of Remembrance, sparking outrage and criticism. By the way, I want to make myself very, very clear, okay? That claim is patently false. Number one. Number two, I want to also everybody to understand, the devil is in the business of creating counterfeits. That's what he does. He's always been good at creating counterfeits. Let's not forget that. The devil is very good at identifying what is true and then creating something that very much resembles what that truth is, but is a patent lie, and then he replaces the truth with a patent lie. He's very good at doing this, folks. This is not something that he does kind of just like a sort of a hobby that he has. He not only does this, he does this extraordinarily well because he's been practicing it for over 4,000 years. The Bible tells us that Satan doesn't just sit there and go, and make all of his crazy faces and, contort himself and so on and so forth. He, at one point, was an angel of light, and he continues to appear as such. So when we look at things that are blatantly satanic, it does not mean that those things look unattractive. It doesn't mean that these things look like something you would never want to face. As a matter of fact, they look uniquely attractive. They're designed to want to get you to be brought in. You want to believe the things that Satan puts in front of you because he's so good at lying. Perhaps one of the most significant things that I can use to demonstrate this is what happened on Mother's Day. Mother's Day, we took a half day off, and we decided, all of the staff, we all decided that we were going to take care of the mothers in our family. And so I decide that we are going to take my wife, per her request, to a place where there's all kinds of vegetation and kind of like a rose garden type place. So as we go through and we kind of, walk around and begin to experience all the just absolutely spectacular things that this place has to offer, we come across this pond. And let me just tell you, it's a swampy looking pond. It's all part of the picture of the garden that we're in, right? And what we realized very quickly in this pond is that there are these massive fish that are in the pond and these big turtles, little ducks all over the place. I mean, everything that you would expect to see in a typical pond. I mean, we saw little baby frogs. Heck, we saw tadpoles. All kinds of things in this little pond area that's adjacent to a massive, ugly-looking swamp. So we noticed very quickly these big fish, and then I decide, just for the heck of it, just to be funny, that I was going to take a tiny little piece of ice, like a little pellet piece of ice, and throw it in the pond to see what happens. So I throw it in the pond, and as I throw it in the pond, I kid you not, maybe 20, I don't know, let's just be conservative and say 10 fish just come out all at the same time to grab that piece of ice. So I'm onto something. So I realize that they think that this is food and that they want it really, really bad, and the kids are having a hard time seeing these fish. So we just thought, you know what? It might be kind of cool. Just throw ice in the water. Little pieces of ice, harmless, doesn't do anything to the fish, doesn't do anything to anything else, the wildlife, any of that. And watch what happens. And for a half hour, we must have thrown into that pond at least 40 or 50 tiny little pieces of ice. The kids would pick up a little tiny piece, throw it in the pond and go, ha, 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 that's really cool. Watch the fish go for the piece of ice and stay there as if what they were eating was something that was nourishing. Like as if we were giving them food. We were giving them little tiny frozen pellets of the water that they're in. No harm, no foul, nothing. But we keep throwing these little pellets of ice in, and the fish jump up, and they're in a competition. The turtles are fighting with the fish, and everybody, even the ducks came to get a piece of the action. They wanted to eat the ice. And what I think happens with the devil is such a perfect picture of what we saw. What we saw on that day was a perfect picture of what the devil does. The devil will get you to think that something is what it actually isn't. I'm not saying that I'm the devil or my kids are the devil, but for the purposes of this illustration, we may be the proverbial devils here. But we take this piece of ice, we throw it in the water, and these fish think they're getting nourishment, and what do? They fight like literal hell to be able to get a bite of something that isn't what they think it is. And when they do bite it, they're confused because they think they just got something. They know they put that thing in their mouth, but they have no idea what's going on because nothing is there. They fought like crazy. They made all kinds of effort to get what they think was something substantive, and they realize that there's nothing there. How in the world does that work in their minds? This is how Satan does this, folks. Satan will get you to put in an extraordinary, and when I say extraordinary, I mean extraordinary amount of effort into getting a little tiny piece of ice that gets thrown into the water, and you realize by the time you come up for it and you have fought for, everything that you can to get what you think is going to be substantive, it ends up in your mouth and you realize there's nothing there. And the worst part about what Satan does is that he's so good at getting you to think that there's something there that you keep going up and you want more and you want more and you want more and you want more and you get absolutely nothing. It's kind of crazy how that works, by the way. With this little fish that was going on and this thing with these turtles and everything, I was just thinking, man, I'm having a blast with my kids and this is fun, but there is undoubtedly a really important spiritual principle that's involved here. There's a really, really significant lesson to learn, and that is the fact that Satan does the exact same thing to us. He throws all these little pieces of ice in the water. We think we're getting solid food. We jump out, we grab the ice, we go through all kinds of effort. We hurt people on the way. We slap them left and right. We push them away. We fight like literal hell for the piece of ice that we think, or the piece of food that we think we're going to get. We're hungry, we want to be nourished, we go grab it, and then we're disappointed to realize at the very moment we bite it, there's nothing there. The best case scenario for us as human beings when we allow ourselves to be capitulated to the ideals, the thoughts, and the philosophies of Satan. This is the best case scenario. Is we end up with emptiness after an extraordinary amount of effort. That's best case scenario. Worst case scenario is you destroy your soul. So they happen in different contexts, in different ways, and they all matter. They all mean something, folks. Every single aspect of what we're talking about is super critical. We have to understand it. If we don't understand it, we're going to end up getting ourselves in huge trouble. So this is what Satan does. Satan gets you to believe a lie. You think, man, I need this. This is so important. Like, I got to get this. You get it, and there's no substance. That's how the devil works. And folks, he's really, really good at this. He's really, really good at this. So let's talk about this group that's created controversy, and let's talk about what the controversy is. The Jewish Voice for Peace, the JVP, by the way, organization funded by Soros. The JVP, which wrote this statement, is a fringe anti-Israel organization that did not condemn Hamas's October 7th massacre across southern Israel and has long celebrated terrorism against Israelis. Yeah. Wait, George Soros is a Jew? Yeah. And Satan is a deceiver. He's really, really good at what he does. Interesting how that works, right? Notice this. However, critics quickly noted that Nakba Day, meant to commemorate the Palestinian Nakba, or catastrophe. By the way, that's, I want you to understand, that's what, when we say the word Nakba, it means like mess, right? Meant to commemorate the Palestinian Nakba, or catastrophe, of the establishment of the modern-day state of Israel, was inaugurated about 35 years after Independence Day. And the other major Israeli national holidays near it, making it impossible for the latter to be intentionally established to disseminate the former, or to desecrate the former. Think about this. This guy, who's part of this organization called the JVP, gets out there and he says, these Israelis are terrible people. These Jews are horrible because they, on purpose, chose to celebrate their Independence Day, like they were able to somehow magically orchestrate what happened on May 14th, 1948, right? As though they had something to do with that. Oh, there was a magical thing that they must have done. There was a potion that they might have created to make this work out. I mean, come on, think about this, guys. What an insane, ridiculous assertion. This Nakba Day was around for so much longer, but yet the Jews now celebrate their Independence Day on the 14th, by the way, and their Memorial Day on the 13th, for the whole purpose of stepping on or pooping all over Nakba Day. Well, here's a pretty simple piece of advice to anybody that would make that assertion. And that is, look at when those days were actually formulated. Everybody is stipulating to the fact that Israel's Memorial Day is the 13th of May, and Israel's Independence Day is the 14th of May, based on historical events. Everybody that knows history and knows the facts of the Palestinian struggle, as they would say, knows that Nakba Day was created 35 years after Israel Independence Day. So the problem is this. How in the world could Israeli Independence Day be created to step all over El Yom Nakba, the Nakba Day? How in the world could it do that if Nakba didn't exist at that time? As a matter of fact, didn't exist until 35 years after. You can't even ask the question, what came first, the chicken or the egg? We have the answer. But you know what's funny? People believe it. I was looking at a video of a college protest the other day. It's just really funny. A woman wearing her hijab, wearing clothing that signifies her struggle for the Palestinian people, knowing full well that if she probably doesn't know this, but if she was in Gaza right now in this moment, they would literally take her life. With a massive sign that says, "Look up Nakba." I mean, these people are sick in their head, and they've been made to be sick in their head by the ultimate liar, by Satan. This is how it works, folks. Like, do we get this? Do we see what's actually happening here? Look at what it goes on to say in this article. However, critics quickly noted that Nakba Day, meant to commemorate the Palestinian Nakba catastrophe of the establishment of the modern state of Israel in 1948, was inaugurated about 35 years after Independence Day and other major Israeli national holidays near it. It goes on to say this: Yom Ha'atzmaut and Yom HaZikaron, Israel's Independence Day and Memorial Day, which, by the way, this is really interesting because I butchered those words because of the way this was written and not paying attention and realizing what they were trying to say. It's really funny. Were established by law in 1963, while Yom, man, they do not know how to spell these things. That's really, really funny. What they're trying to say is the Independence Day was established as a commemoration or a national holiday in 1963, while they're saying that Israel's Memorial Day was established in 1959. That's what goes with the territory when you're looking at live broadcasting. In contrast, Nakba Day was officially established by Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat in 1998, folks. However, local commemorations and protests were held for years before that. The term Nakba was initially coined by Arab intellectual Konstantin Zurich in his 1948 book. The meaning of Nakba, he used the term to refer to humiliation caused by many Arab armies losing to a small Jewish one in the 1948 war for Israel's independence. Over time, however, it has come to refer to the fact that about 750,000 Palestinians became refugees as a result of the war, fleeing amid the Arab invasion. I mean, look, do you guys see the ridiculousness of all of this? Do you guys see how the lies continue to be communicated? It's just really, really funny. By the way, I should do this because I completely forgot. I got so caught up in the topic. But it is a good point, right? We should talk one other moment when I have a moment, and I think it's kind of important to do this. We should talk about a majority of the lies that center around the accusations of genocide. We could probably do that in a few minutes. Matter of fact, I think I'm going to end up doing this in a few minutes. Dean, yeah, Dean is right about that. I should read Dean's comments to you. As a matter of fact, let me do this. Let me read some of the comments that came out on these super chats and super stickers because I forgot to do that earlier. Look at some of these comments and then we'll get right back into this. First one, Brad. Brad always gets me in trouble with the comments that he makes, right? Oh, my goodness. Oh, I think you can, Brad. Brad says this. He says, well, it looks like Flashbang is going to debate. He's talking about Joe Biden is going to debate Donald Trump in a 13-second video with 5 cuts. Joe said, Trump, make my day. I guess it's time to order popcorn. Brother James, may I put you down for a box? Yeah, put me down for like 5 boxes. Go hard for Jesus or stay home, point blank. Amen, Vindog. Mikey, thank you, brother. I love you, man. And Dean, you are right, bro. Dean says, James, you really need to stop making perfect sense. It totally contradicts all this Nakba heads. It's pretty funny. But do you guys see what's happening here? Like, do you guys understand what's taking place? The funny thing to me is the 750,000 Palestinians that have been displaced. Can I ask a question? Like, this is really important. Honestly, and this is, you could call it rhetorical in nature. You can actually say I'm out of line for wanting to impose it, whatever, but I'm going to go ahead and do it, right? Can anybody, and this does not go to you guys, because truthfully, I would be willing to bet you that 90% of my audience can tell me what's been happening in Sudan and South Sudan. I would bet you my bottom dollar that an overwhelming amount of my audience could tell me about Azerbaijan and what's happening with the Armenians. But you know what? You are rare people. You are not the regular world thinker. The regular world thinker won't even be able to identify what's happening even in Syria. No, I bring this up because you're going to be bothered by a certain amount of people that you think are displaced, even though they're the one that broke the ceasefire. Yet you have got nothing to say about 2 million dying in Sudan in the last few years. No one wants to say anything about that. No one wants to say about the hundreds of thousands reaching north of 1 million Armenians who are being murdered, displaced, put down, inhumane treatment. You want to talk about real humanitarian crisis? Why don't we stop for a minute and talk about the abortions that are taking place in this country alone? But nobody wants to stop and talk about those things because nobody wants to deal in facts. Why? Because Satan is the father of lies. So what used to be referred to as Nakba, which, by the way, Nakba, the disaster, was not the fact that the Palestinians were so oppressed. The disaster was these piddly little Jews should have never been able to defeat us mighty and great Arab countries. That's what the Nakba is. That's what the disaster is. This is ridiculous. At the same time, a similar number of Jews, this is what the article goes on to say, a similar number of Jews became refugees as they were expelled from countries in the Middle East and North Africa. By the way, if you don't think we have a real genocide problem, let me tell you something. You're deceived, because we have a serious genocide problem. And in some cases, I don't have a problem saying that. I think the terms like genocide have been very much overused and thoroughly misunderstood. But if you want to talk about a real genocide problem, how about we just take a moment of and examine what's happened with the Jews? Should we do that? I have done this so many times before. I'm actually at the point now where I'm worn out from going over these numbers. What happened in Algeria? Algeria, in 1948, there were 140,000 Jews. I'm going to do this a completely different way. I'm going to go over several of these countries that I think are really, really important to go over. But the numbers that I'm going to give you in the current day are going to blow your mind. Algeria, 140,000 Jews, folks. For those of you guys that don't know anything about Algeria, just so that you understand, if you look at the north portion of the African continent, and you go to the farthest, most eastern portion of the North African continent, you have Morocco. It's kind of in that, northwestern portion. It's kind of like in that northwestern tip. Okay? If you move over, it's Algeria, which may be one of the largest African countries on the African continent. It's bigger than Mauritania. It's bigger than Niger. It's bigger than Libya. Yes, folks. Bigger than Tunisia. Bigger than Chad. Bigger than Mali. Way bigger than Western Sahara or Morocco. Bigger than Egypt. Bigger than Sudan. Think about this, folks. Just in Algeria alone, I want you guys to let this sink in. There were 140,000 Jews. In Egypt, there were 75,000 Jews. How about this? In Iraq, there were 135,000 Jews. By the way, let's go back up to Algeria for a second. If you look at Algeria on the map and you go further west, you have Morocco. In Morocco, folks, there were 265,000 Jews. In Morocco alone had the largest population of Jews in the African or the North African continent. The northern portion of the African continent. Iraq, 135,000 Jews. Lebanon, 5,000 Jews. Libya, 38,000 Jews. Syria, 30,000 Jews. How about this? Tunisia. Ready for this? In Tunisia, folks, 105,000 Jews in Tunisia. Think about that for a second. Everywhere. They're everywhere. Like think it through. And by the way, if you look at Tunisia on the African map, it is in between Algeria and Libya to the north. It's the northern part of Libya. The northwestern part of Libya on that border is Tunisia. And to the east of Algeria, you'll see Tunisia. Tiny little portion. Tiny. Not big at all. Matter of fact, maybe one of the smaller countries in Africa. And Tunisia had 105,000 Jews. How about the Arabian Peninsula? Let's just look at one country in the Arabian Peninsula because it has a tremendous effect. We'll look at two countries, Yemen and Aden. When you go over Yemen and Aden, this is the southern portion of the Arabian Peninsula, you had 63,000 Jews. So when you look at Algeria, Egypt, Iraq, Lebanon, Libya, Morocco, Syria, Tunisia, Yemen, and Aden, the total number of Jews that you had in those countries in 1948 was a whopping 851,000. 851,000. You know how many are believed to be in those countries today? The total amount of people Jews believed to be in those countries today, less than 1,000, folks. You tell me, where's the real genocide happening? Remember what I told you? That Satan is the father of lies and he's a great liar and he's really, really good at what he does? This is exactly the problem that we're dealing with. He is a liar. He's a complete liar. At the same time period, more Jews than even their claim as Palestinians have become displaced from their homeland. By the way, let's just talk about Gaza for just a second. Do you know that before Israel completely abandoned Gaza and gave it to the Palestinians, do you know before that time there were 50,000 Jews that called that place their home? Do you know that the state of Israel took away their property, made them leave their houses in Gaza, and completely cleared Gaza of any Jew? What did they do with Gaza? They pooped all over it. So don't come and tell me that there's this genocidal problem at the hands of the Jews. Quite frankly, I think it's the Jews that can argue that genocide has been their problem, not as a person initiating the genocide, but as a person on the reciprocal end of it, on the receiving end of it. Let's get real for a second, folks. Let's talk about the real facts. It's critical that we understand this and we recognize what's actually going on, because if we don't recognize what's going on, we're going to end up in the same boat that we were before. And I'm going to show you an example of how good the devil is at lying when it comes to this. Right? But a clock is right 2 times a day, and every now and again that truth comes out. Look what it goes on to say. David May, research manager at the Foundation of Defense of Democracies, rebuked JVP's tweet, arguing Nakba Day was placed there specifically as a rejection of Jewish independence in their ancestral land. Its timing marks a continued rejection of the Jewish right to independence and self-rule that the Palestinians desire for themselves. So the Palestinians placed their holiday around the Israeli ones, not the other way around. A basic knowledge of the history of the Palestinian conflict or the thought process of Israelis would have prevented a tweet assuming that everything Israel does is a callous attempt to erase Palestinians rather than an internal decision based on a collective memory. But JVP goes on to say, but JVP and their, I don't even know what, I think this is a typo, see Israel as an irredeemable, evil, and binary world composed of victims and oppressors. Everything they do stems from this basic perception. By the way, let me read his description again. He says, JVP sees Israel as an irredeemable evil in a binary world composed of victims and oppressors. With all this talk of non-binary, the binary application that he's bringing is the oppressed and the oppressors. And their thought process that he's describing is dead accurate. By the way, sound familiar? That's what they're seeking to reduce America to. They're seeking to reduce America to an understanding of the oppressors versus the oppressed. And they're trying to create a new social class while polarizing the existing ones? Is it because they all got together in the same room and said, okay, we'll do this in Israel and we'll make the Palestinians our people. Okay, we'll do this in America and we'll make these people our people. No, they didn't get together and plan all this. Satan has inspired the same people. Why don't we just understand it for what it is, folks? Really funny how the history of Israel gets so jacked up and so misunderstood and so dang broken. Folks, if you don't believe me, let me show you a video of Hillary Clinton talking about what's going on in the Middle East. How about we do that? How about I show you a video of her talking about her perspective on what's happening in the Middle East? By the way, this is her on The View, which is a reprehensible show ran by reprehensible people. But you ought to hear what she says about the Palestinians seeking peace, wanting to find peace. This is her talking about her own husband. I think it's worthwhile looking at and having a conversation concerning, because once again, the devil is so unbelievably good at lying. How can somebody as evil as Hillary Clinton understand this while there's still confusion going on everywhere else? It's that crazy. Watch what she says here. This is really, really interesting. Watch this.
As well as the U.S. are part of the problem as well.
Well, I think that the problem predates October 7th, and I think that's what President Obama was talking about, because let's remember, this is a very long and complicated history.
Yeah.
My husband, with the Israeli government at the time in 2000, offered a Palestinian state to the Palestinians, at that time run by Arafat.
Yeah. Okay? Now, listen to what she says. Her husband, Bill Clinton. Just listen to the significance. You know how Hillary Clinton is lying? She's moving her lips. But there's one glib moment here where she chooses not to lie. Look at what she said. This is Hillary Clinton, people. This is Hillary Clinton talking about her husband. Folks, this person right here is the former Secretary of State that made Northern Africa blow up. She's single-handedly responsible for Shouat al-Tahrir, what happened in Egypt. She's responsible for the presence of the Islamic Brotherhood growing substantially in Egypt, specifically Lower Egypt. And she's very much responsible for Benghazi. She's all about lighting the match and letting the place burn. But listen to what she says about this specific issue. It's critical that you pay attention to this. It's critical.
Sir Arafat.
The PLO.
And the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which, by the way...
known today, by the way, as the PA, the Palestinian Authority. Let me rewind this so that you can hear it a little bit better in context. Sorry, I had to just stop and mention this.
Run by Arafat, Yasser Arafat.
The PLO.
And the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which, by the way, took out of its charter violence against Israel. So you got to separate the Palestinians who believe that there is some future of peace with Hamas, which believes it has to destroy Israel. Yeah.
Which, by the way, this is where she's also lying. She's wrong, okay? The Palestinian Authority has every desire in the world to see the destruction of Israel. If you don't believe it, listen to Mahmoud Abbas talking. Go to a video. I made a video with before it even was before October the 7th, where I translated what Mahmoud Abbas said. He believes that Hitler did what he did to the Jews, not because the Jews were Jews. He believed that he did it to the Jews because the Jews were bad people and they deserved it. So don't tell me, Hillary Clinton, that the Palestinians here want this peace. They don't want peace. But that's beside the point. Let's let her go on talking, because look what she says.
Those are two different organizations, and they have to be viewed in that way. Arafat turned that down. There would have been a Palestinian state now for 23 years if he had not walked away from it. There was another attempt when...
You hear this, folks? You hear this? And she's, by the way, not talking about the attempt that happened with Ronald Reagan. She's not talking about the attempt that happened earlier on in the establishment of the nation with the British colonialists, as they call them. She's not talking about the multiple attempts made by people like Carter and everybody else. And by the way, when those attempts were made, that's a whole other story. Not to even be, I mean, it's amazing to see how brutally opposed they were to do anything. And I'll show you why. I'm going to show you why they're opposed to this. You'll see in a minute, but look what she says.
I was Secretary of State to try to, bring the Palestinians and the Israelis together. That didn't work out. Israel left Gaza in 2005 and forcibly ejected 50,000 Israelis who were living in Gaza.
You hear that? She's not wrong.
They left all of their infrastructure. They had a big infrastructure of greenhouses where they were supplying fruits, vegetables, flowers, etc. And the Palestinians deserved to have a productive, successful economy in Gaza. Hamas.
Did you hear what she said? Israel left it all for them. Israel left them all the greenhouse stuff. Israel left them all the beautiful plants, left them resorts on the beaches, left them everything that the Jews worked so hard to build. Forcibly removed them out of Gaza and said, here you go, Palestinians, this is yours. But watch what Hillary Clinton says happened, because it's really important. Listen to what she says happened here. It's critical, okay?
And the Palestinians deserved to have a productive, successful economy in Gaza. Hamas came in and basically destroyed all of that and killed a lot of other Palestinians. So I think when President Obama says that, it requires us to look at the history. And of course, history holds all of us accountable. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that is a fair statement. But today we have to look at where we are. And I believe it's imperative.
Okay, so I think that what I just showed you proves the point. Even Hillary Clinton, and how do you know Hillary Clinton's, lying? She's opening her lips. Even Hillary Clinton is admitting to what happened here. Even Hillary Clinton is pointing out to everybody what's taking place. If you want a really solid picture of what's happening, okay, listen to the opening remarks that's being made here in this congressional hearing on the subject and the problem of terrorism and what's going on. If you really want to see a glimpse of what's happening, watch this. I'm going to air this for a second because you need to hear this, because I'm going somewhere with this. Watch this.
I now recognize Mr. Goldberg for his opening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ranking Member, members of the committee. An honor to be here with you. The Ranking Member mentioned the timing of this hearing, and I do want to mention a lot of things about timing of this hearing. While we're sitting here today, there are active plots underway to assassinate former United States officials, including some of our colleagues who served with us in the prior administration. While we are sitting here today, we are going to be honoring, remembering, marking the one-year anniversary of Mahsa Amini's murder by the morality police in Iran, the start of an uprising that continues in Iran till today. While we sit here today, the timing of this hearing, we are also monitoring the continued flow of weapons from Iran to Russia to use against the Ukrainian people. And while we sit here today, we've just heard from the Mossad director in Israel, Barnea, who told the world over the last year, Israel has foiled 27 terror plots carried out by Iran, targeting Jews and Israelis throughout the world, with more on the way, including potentially in North America. While we sit here today having this hearing, the timing of this is also the nuclear expansion we are seeing in Iran. We have not, in fact, seen the slowing of Iran's nuclear program the way that the Wall Street Journal headline had tried to characterize. If you look the same day at the Reuters report, you will see a more accurate headline, Mr. Ranking Member, and that is the expansion of Iran's nuclear stockpile at highly enriched uranium levels, including 60% and 20% and low-enriched uranium at 5%, while Iran continues to build a secret new underground facility near Natanz that is supposed to be at 100 meters underground and potentially impenetrable to military action. Cumulatively, what better time than today, as in the news we learn about money flowing to this regime, this same regime that is carrying out all of these illicit activities under United States approval, than right now. So I salute you, Mr. Chairman, for having this hearing. The history is important here. When President Biden took office, against all advice from many experts, he decided to erase maximum pressure. We haven't been having a maximum pressure for 2.5 years against Iran. We've been having maximum deference against Iran for 2.5 years, chasing after the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism, trying to get back to a nuclear deal that was already expiring and already dangerous for the United States of America. And despite Iran continuing to ratchet up its nuclear program, racing forward to the nuclear threshold, first to 20% enriched uranium in January of 2021, then to 60% enriched uranium later that year, the production of uranium metal, a key component of nuclear weapons, starting to downgrade their cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency, all of that happening under President Biden's maximum deference policy, not under President Trump's campaign of maximum pressure. But that's the history. Let's deal with what's happening in front of us today. There's headlines right now. We're calling this because we believe we have a $6 billion hostage ransom payment on our hands. $6 billion being released for Iran to access coming out of South Korea in exchange for 5 Americans who have been wrongfully, unlawfully detained in Iran. There's also 5 Iranians that we're releasing as part of this deal. It defies logic to believe that the United States is paying $6 billion for 5 people.
You hear this?
It would be a historic hostage ransom payment. It would mark a huge cost for all Americans who travel and live abroad. And you think you have problems in Iran coming forward after this payment? If you're Evan Gershkovich sitting in a Russian prison today, the price on your head just went way up. If you're traveling to China or living in China with an espionage act that says that the Chinese can pick up an American now and accuse them of espionage, there's a price on your head too. No, Mr. Chairman, let me tell you what's happening. If you go through the record starting in May of this year, when a senior NSC official, Brett McGurk, traveled to Oman secretly without disclosing to the public and passed messages through the Sultan of Oman, who then carried them on a trip to Tehran and said to the supreme leader in Tehran, the Americans want a deal. They are willing to pay a lot of money, release all your money from various accounts around the world, let your oil flow to historic record highs to China, and for all of that, they just ask you not to cross that weapons-grade uranium threshold. You can keep going forward with all other parts of your program towards the nuclear threshold, just don't produce 90%. This is not a $6 billion deal. Stop with the headlines on $6 billion. This could be at least a $50 billion deal or more. We've already seen a waiver come up to Congress for $10 billion to move from Iraq to Oman. $6 billion now from South Korea to Qatar. $7 billion that supposedly is going to get swapped for Iranian special drawing rights of the IMF for fiat currency, and $25 billion of more for oil profits now going to China, not enforced. All in violation of INARA, all in defiance of transparency to the American people. I hope to answer all your questions here. Thank you for having us, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you much.
You hear that, folks? So the point that I'm driving home here is that the narrative that you're being told publicly by a world that continues to accept the lies that are being communicated is not true. The narrative continues to carry levels of deception that are on par with the modus operandi of Satan. I cannot emphasize this enough, ladies and gentlemen. I cannot continue to, on a regular basis, demonstrate how real this very issue is. I want people to understand that beyond the shadow of a doubt, so much of what you hear on a day-to-day basis is completely and patently false, because Satan is the father of lies. If you figure out the real story, then you're better able to determine and understand what's going on, because the picture being drawn for you is completely different. But the real story here is something completely outside of what the existing narrative is. We're going to talk about this in a second. We're going to have a conversation about this thing that's going on in Egypt. I'm actually making a whole video that I'm dedicating to it. But I want you guys to see this because, like, this is really, really important. What the news is telling you is very different from what's really happening. And this is the reason why things are about to get very, very real here. Because when you look at this, it means something completely different. Completely. Look at this. I want to show this because this is like a very, very powerful picture. Musab Hassan Yusuf, right after October the 7th, he's on with Piers Morgan. And listen to what he actually says here when he starts communicating something regarding the issue of October 7th. This again, same issue, same real deal. Watch what happens. Listen to what he says. By the way, for those of you who don't know who Musab Hassan Yusuf is, he is the son of the leader of Hamas, the founder of Hamas. Listen to what he says.
And I am hearing the stories from pro-Palestine and from those who are using what's so-called the Palestinian cause. They care the least for the Palestinian children and their future. You know, I am the legitimate representative of the Palestinian children. The child within me speaks. I don't want somebody coming from London or somebody coming from the other side of the world to tell me what is the struggle of the Palestinian children. The Palestinian children, the Palestinian society has been hijacked by these criminals, and anybody who takes their side is participating in their crime. This is my answer to those people. And for the civilian casualties, etc., you know, first of all, Hamas is using, and it's very clearly, it's a fact that Hamas used civilians as human shields. It's a fact. Then it's a fact that Israel called and warned civilians to evacuate buildings before they strike them. But in the meantime, Hamas put roadblocks to stop civilians from evacuating to safe zones. Hamas single misfire killed hundreds of refugees taking shelter at a hospital, and they blamed Israel. What are we talking about here? Israel is a democracy. Israel is accountable. Israel is not thirsty for the Palestinian blood. In the meantime, Israel is capable of wiping out Arab capitals in seconds. Why Israel does not attempt to abuse its power? But why, when the Arabs have just a little bit of power, couple of missiles, they misuse power by launching them at civilians and kill them in their living rooms? We have a fundamental problem, and we need to stop blaming Israel. We invited this upon our heads, and the rest of the world, if they don't know the reality on the ground, it's better that they shut up.
You hear that? I mean, but here's my thing with all of this, right? Why aren't we hearing this in the mainstream? Why is the mainstream media not talking about this? Folks, they're not talking about this because Satan does exactly what I described happened on Mother's Day. He's throwing ice in the pond, giving the fish the sincere hope that what got thrown in the pond is going to be good for them, when in reality it is not substantive, it's not true, it's fictitious, it's real, it's fake. The devil is good at what he does, folks. Let me repeat myself again. The devil is not just good at what he does, he's remarkable at it. He is unbelievably skilled and talented in this arena. He is the father of lies. And beyond any shadow of a doubt, he is remarkable in his capacity to be able to get people deceived. Let's talk about another picture of this. If this still hasn't convinced you, if you look at this and you think that something is still different based on what the popular media narrative is, which, by the way, I talk to you guys as though you're convinced that the media is correct and you hold their position. I'm talking to a group of really smart people. So I know for a fact that the audience that I'm in front of, the majority of the audience that I'm in front of, is way too smart to fall for these baloney lies that are being communicated. Way too smart. But can I show you the severity and the depth of deception that the enemy continues to show? Because all of it goes to communicate the same principle. Let me play for you a warning. I'm going to see if I can find it. I think I can. I am going to find a warning that came across from, and I've been playing these recently because it's gonna become a very valid picture for what to expect, right? Like how to understand things and what to expect in the future. This is from, I believe, the Emiratis foreign minister. I have to find the video. I'm going to find it here because I want you guys to see this. And it's really important for you to hear what he says. By the way, when the foreign minister said what you're about to watch him say, he said this, and I want to make myself very, very clear. He didn't say this yesterday. He didn't say this last week. He didn't say this 3 weeks ago. He didn't say this 5 weeks ago. He didn't say this after October the 7th. He actually said this in 2017. He warned everybody in 2017. Look what he says here. This is critical that you understand this because this is going to be important in understanding this Egypt story. Look at what the foreign minister of the Emiratis says. The minister of foreign affairs. Listen to what he says. It's critical. Watch this.
أنت تتحمل مسؤوليتها. And
he stopped immediately speaking in Arabic, by the way. I love his Arabic. He stopped speaking Arabic immediately, and now he's speaking in English. And the woman is going to offer to translate. He says, no, I'm going to speak in English. I know you have translation, but I want to make sure you don't mess this up. Why? Because they oftentimes mess up the translation from Arabic. But look what he says.
and let me say this in English so you can understand what I'm saying.
I have translation.
No, I know you have translation, but I just want to make sure you get it right. There will come a day that we will see far more radical extremists and terrorists coming out of Europe because of the lack of decision-making, trying to be politically correct, or assuming that they know the Middle East and they know Islam and they know the others far better than we do. And I'm sorry, but that's pure ignorance.
So he warns everybody. Okay? He's talking about coming out of Europe. Let's not even address the issues that we're seeing all over the rest of the world. Let's just talk about Europe. Because if we have a conversation about Europe alone, let me show you a picture of how prophetic what this man is saying actually is. I'm going to bring up another video. And when you see what is being communicated in this video, you might think, wow, this has to be fringe. There's no way that this can be a mainstream thought in Europe. It's just impossible. This can't be the case, right? Do you understand, folks, that in Great Britain alone, there are over, last I heard, 50 Sharia law courts? Some people might think, no way. Watch this. Remember what the foreign minister of the Emiratis said. Watch this interview. Watch this.
And how's the campaign to move Britain over to Sharia law coming along?
Well, this is in the hands of God. We do our best to propagate Islam. Well, of course it is. I think many people will see that democracy and freedom is no good for the British, no good for Afghanistan, and in fact, we need an alternative. Unlike man-made law, the Sharia is not something which gives you a right today to take it away tomorrow. It's good in all times and places.
Okay, notice that. Democracy is no good for Great Britain. But Sharia law will be perfect for Great Britain. It was created by Allah. He says God. What he means to say is Allah. It was created by Allah. Allah is the chief of deceivers, by the way, for those of you that don't know. And if you think that the assertion that I'm making about Allah being the chief of deceivers is something that I'm saying just for a fact, let me read one passage from the Quran to you. Let me just do it really quickly. وَمَكَرُوا وَمَكَرَ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرَ الْمَكَرِينَ. What that says is that Allah is the chief of deceivers. Allah is the chief of deceivers. So if Allah is the chief of deceivers, imagine if Allah is the one governing the Sharia court, Sharia law. How's that working out for you, everybody? I can promise you it's not working out well. Listen to what he goes on to say. By the way, what Amjad just said is not just a fringe thought in the UK. What he said is a very common way of thinking. So let's just think this through for a minute. And Amjad is going to get challenged right now. And listen to what he says. Folks, pay very close attention to what Amjad says. You have to pay close attention. I am begging you, pay close attention to what this man says. He's not messing around. Listen.
Siri, to make this an issue of freedom and democracy is absurd. Anjem, you haven't had a hair on your body touched by this government or this country. You haven't spent a day in prison. You haven't suffered one bit for your views. You're allowed to sit here right now because of freedom and democracy. In your so-called caliphate, you'd have me killed, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you have me? Am I an apostate that deserves death?
Under your caliphate, he would be executable, would he?
He will be judged by an Islamic judge, and then after that...
So he's acknowledging it. He's acknowledging it. Well done, Yamjam. Well done. You've accurately represented Islam. I'm telling you guys. That's why when we talk about this whole Palestinian thing, and the overwhelming majority of people will live a perfect life if given the opportunity. No, they won't. No, they won't. They will not, because they do not think like we do. And I wish I could get people to see that. I wish I could get people to see the fact that they have no idea, no clue what they're talking about. These people don't know what they're representing. If they, folks, listen to me. If they knew what they were representing, they would not represent such things. But because they're so deceived and their minds are so given to the lies, they buy it. They believe it. By the way, this is happening on every level, folks. You understand that this is happening everywhere? We just had Zelensky meeting more government officials. He just met a few hours ago with the head of our State Department. They say that he is the leader of democracy in Ukraine. Oh, he's the leader of democracy. He's killed more priests than any leader anytime recently. He's killed his political opponents. Do you honestly think that the man is actually a freedom fighter? Let's just call it what it is. He's a greedy, evil individual. There's nothing about him that's good. If you don't believe me, here's a video that he is making where he is about to justify the decision that he's announcing that he's going to shut down anybody's opportunity to vote. Look what he says.
Ми повинні визначитись, що зараз час оборони, час битви, від якої залежить доля держави і людей, а не час вкидів, яких від України очікує лише Росія. Я вважаю, що зараз вибори не на часі. І якщо потрібно поставити крапку у тій чи іншій політичній суперечці.
It's not the time for elections while we're in the middle of war, and we have to end political disputes. Ladies and gentlemen, according to our Constitution, it's the political disputing that keeps us from engaging into the war machine. It's the political disputes that keep people honest. All you guys that are calling me on the phone and you're telling me that I should stop doing stuff like this because somehow you have a 5-minute association with Ukraine, wake up. At least acknowledge the truth. Zelensky is an evil man.
І далі працювати лише у єдності, то в державі є структури, які здатні ставити крапки і давати суспільству всі необхідні відповіді, щоб не залишилось простору для конфліктів та чужої гри проти України. Моє особисте ставлення і заклик, так само як і 24 лютого, дбати про нашу державу, про її захист, про знищення окупанта, про волю України, яка здобувається зараз в боях заради України. Я дякую всім, хто допомагає, слава усім, хто воює і працює заради України. Слава Україні!
You love that? Slava Ukraine. He's even saying glory to Ukraine. Whatever happened to glory to God Almighty? I'm telling you guys. Like, are we going to wake up and understand the deception? Are we going to wake up to see what's going on? And when people ask, well, why then are we spending so much money on this? Because there's a narrative that has to be communicated in order to feed the military-industrial complex. It's their war machines that they need to keep feeding because that's how they gain power. Because like the Revelation chapter 6 principle, don't mess with the oil and the wine. There has to be a ruling class. There has to be a group of people that do these things while they take advantage of the blatant stupidity that people continue to have. Guys, do you understand that it's gotten so bad that people don't even know what the Holocaust is? Do you understand that? If you think that I'm lying, here we go. This is like the day of show and tell, but I might as well prove the point here. Look at this. This is not fictitious. Watch this.
What is the Holocaust?
The what?
The Holocaust.
I don't know.
What is the Holocaust?
The who?
The Holocaust.
This some California stuff?
What group of people did the Nazis target?
Oh, why is it about Nazis? Kids.
Yeah. You wonder why history is repeating itself right now, folks? History is repeating itself because the devil has become so good at rewriting history that actual history has been erased to the point where people don't even understand the basic principles. Am I kidding? Is there any joke here? Do you guys understand, with the discussion of wanting to do the Palestinian state, do you know that even the Palestinians don't want a Palestinian state? Well, let me back up. They want a Palestinian state, but they want a single state. They have no interest in the Jews being alive. Right? Isn't that funny, by the way? Can I just say this? Isn't it funny how they call the Palestinians the Israelis the Nazis? Oh, if you're a Jew, you're a Nazi. That's what they're saying. Even though the Jews were the prime target of the Nazis. How about we go through another history lesson? Let's do this This one is a good one to be given to us by the ambassador of the UN. This truly is show and tell day. But how about we do this? Listen to what he says.
Look at this picture. This picture tells you everything you need to know about this conflict. This is Haj Amin al-Husseini, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, and one of the founding fathers of Palestinian nationalism. Al-Husseini dedicated his life to ensuring that there would be no Jewish presence in Israel or in any Arab land. And it was the Mufti's ideology which sparked the expulsion of Jews from Arab countries and Iran. A century ago, Council members, over 1 million Jews lived in Arab countries. 1 million Jews. Yet today, there are only a couple thousands. Where did all the Jews disappear to? The Jews of Lebanon, the Jews of Syria, Yemen, Iraq, and Iran, they were expelled. So enough with the hypocrisy.
Isn't that funny? Those are the facts that they don't talk about. And that brings us to the article that gave me the thought about things getting real. Here it is. Egypt rejects Israeli plans for Rafah crossing, sources say. All I need to do is read the first few paragraphs to give you a better understanding of what's being done here. Egypt has rejected an Israeli proposal for the two countries to coordinate to open the Rafah crossing between Egypt's Sinai Peninsula and the Gaza Strip, and to manage its future operation. Two Egyptian security sources are the ones revealing this. Officials from Israeli security service Shin Bet presented the plan on a visit to Cairo on Wednesday amid rising tension between the two countries following Israel's military advance the last week into Rafah, the Hamas terrorist group's last stronghold in Gaza, and where hundreds of thousands of Palestinians displaced by war have been sheltering. The Rafah crossing has been a main conduit for humanitarian aid entering Gaza and an exit point for medical evacuees from the territory. Israel took operational control of the crossing and has said it will not compromise on preventing Hamas having any future role in neighboring Palestinian enclave. The Israeli proposal included a mechanism for how to manage the crossing after an Israeli withdrawal. Egypt insists the crossing should be managed only by Palestinian authorities, they added. An Israeli official who requested anonymity said the delegation traveled to Egypt mainly to discuss matters around Rafah, given recent developments. Egypt's foreign press did not immediately, or Egypt's foreign press office did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Egypt and Israel have a long-standing peace treaty and security cooperation, but the relationship has come under strain during the Gaza war, especially since Israeli advance around Rafah. That's what the media wants you to know. That's what they want you to think. Look at what the rest of the article says. I'll actually give you one section of it. Egypt says Rafah's closure is due solely to the Israeli military operation. It has expressed concern about refugees from Gaza trying to enter Egypt. Baloney. They did not close the border at Rafah because of some IDF deployment seeking to eliminate Hamas. I got news for you, folks. Hamas was a creation of the Islamic Brotherhood. Islamic Brotherhood is in Egypt. Egypt hates Islamic Brotherhood. You ask anybody from Egypt about Shawara Tahrir, they'll tell you why they hate Islamic Brotherhood. El-Sisi, the current president of Egypt, pretty much pushed Islamic Brotherhood out of government. The reason why they don't want Gaza to have an open corridor into Egypt is because they don't want Palestinians there. And the reason why they don't want Palestinians there is they know that if Palestinians are allowed in the country, they're going to have problems. Not only problems in Rafah on the Egyptian side, but problems in the Sinai. Problems in Kahara, in Cairo. Problems all over upper and lower Egypt. That's why they don't want people from Palestine there. Palestinians, sorry, that's what I meant to say. Palestinians. That's why. That's the real reason. Now, what Egypt is telling the whole world is, we're blocking the crossing because the crossing should not allow to be managed by anybody other than the Palestinians. That's their most recent iteration of their reason. The original reason that they gave to everybody, and I want everybody to pay attention to this, is because if you allow this to continue on, then the Palestinians won't have the land that they had because we'll be allowing them to go into another land. And if they come into Egypt, then that means they've given up Palestine. Egypt knows that's a load of garbage, like anybody who's an astute student of history. Everybody knows those things, folks. Now, why is this such a big deal? And why is it that things are about to change? You mark my words. Listen to me good. Egypt's going to change their tune. And they are going to continue to support Israeli operations in making sure that Islamic Brotherhood doesn't prevail by allowing Hamas to come in from the north. Israel is going to be the beneficiary of normalization that has already taken place between them and Saudi Arabia, because Egypt will function as a new land bridge corridor that will bring them more money than even the operation of the Suez Canal. I promise you when I say this, Al-Sisi is not going to throw that away. Why am I calling this a game changer? Why am I saying it's about to get real? Because, folks, I'm telling you this right now. I have not seen deception like this in ever. The campaigns are increasing. Why? Because I could tell you this right now. I really believe this. I believe we are looking at a condition where Christ could come at any moment. We are seeing it again and again and again and again, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm telling you this right now because it's so absolutely critical that you wake up. It's absolutely critical that we all wake up, that we understand things for what they are, because what we're seeing here is serious. This is so unbelievable. This is so unbelievable. I want everybody to recognize and understand how real all of these things are. The devil is getting better and better and better and better and better and better and better at deception. He's always been good at it, but in these last days, folks, he's using newer tools, newer opportunities to completely rape you, rob from you, steal from you, destroy you. We need to wake up. Now, here's the rule. If you want to be able to stay where your head needs to stay in understanding the facts and knowing what's going on, you know what you need to do? You need to know the Bible. You need to study the truth. It's that simple. You'll be able to understand it more when you give yourself to the facts. All right. We're going to end it right now. We went a lot longer than I thought. We are going to do locals. We're going to do it in a few minutes. I have to skip away and use the restroom, and then I'll come back, and Dale and I are going to take some questions. So you have it right there. Let's wrap it up in prayer, you guys, and then we'll take a few-minute break and jump over so that we can take some live questions, okay? Father in heaven, we just thank you, Lord, for this time. I pray that you just bless these your people, Lord, who are looking to you, seeking you. Open up the eyes of so many, Lord, that don't understand these issues, Lord. Help them to see them clearly, Lord. We love you, Father, and thank you. We look to you, and we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Keep fighting the good fight, you guys. We love you. God bless you.